Florida has statewide student walkout to protest DeSantis and GOP censorship.
High school students in Fort Myers walked out of class Friday as part of protests against the bill to overhaul higher education in Florida. College students in Orlando also took part.
There is a right and there is a wrong, and right now the state of Florida is wrong!
Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' proposal includes eliminating diversity programs, banning gender studies majors, and weakening tenure protection for professors.
They're not going to be able to learn history. Being able to learn history is so important so that we don't repeat it.
But DeSantis isn't backing down. He says diversity, equity, and inclusion is really about imposing an ideological agenda on students.
DEI more appropriately stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public institutions.
On Friday, April 21st, hundreds of Florida high school and college students walked out of classrooms to protest Governor Ron DeSantis and his education policies. The 24-hour action, also called Walk Out to Learn, called for students to walk out of their schools, register to vote, or check their voter registration status, take part in a brief lesson on banned policies, and enroll in a virtual, college-level course in African American history. Rallies and speeches were also scheduled across the Sunshine State, from Jacksonville and Orlando to Sarasota and Miami. Youth activists mobilized the Social Equity Through Education Alliance, said the movement of its defiance and proposed and passed state legislation that restricts lessons and discussions about race and LGBTQ history. Walk Out to Learn's website said, quote, Black, queer, trans, and female-identifying people and their histories are the target of government censorship. Our government has forgotten that students have rights. We're here to remind him, end quote. Friday's movement was crucial in building and achieving short-term goals that will lead to long-term results. On April 19th, Governor DeSantis expanded Florida's controversial Don't Say Gay law, which bans all teachings and discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity up to 3rd grade. This new expansion prohibits instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity past 12th grade. I find it interesting that we are talking about this education right now, and with New School, which was founded back in the 60s under the principles of being inclusive and diverse as part of their charter, has been given $15 million to find new faculty and just ousted everybody. It's crazy what they're doing to try to make sure that we can't say that we're diverse or inclusive.
I will also add, I remember seeing this on my social media, that they specifically did not allow this to happen on their campus, and they had to move their event off campus. I remember seeing that on the social, I think it was Twitter.
I'm curious for all of us. So this happens on Friday. What kind of impact do you think the walkout has had on LGBTQ community? Did it affect, Tampa Bay, Orlando, Broward County, Miami-Dade County? Did you hear a lot in the LGBTQ community that this was going on and that there was much effect?
I heard nothing.
I heard, I'm always on the social stuff, and I know, quite a few people who are involved, but I only saw it because I think I was kind of looking for it. I don't think it was really out there that much. And I think quite frankly, I think there's so much going on that's bad for our community and many communities that it's kind of almost impossible to keep up and stay focused on everything. But the youth and the young people are where the power is going to be, because they're the new voters. But
is the strategy of overwhelm us then, because that's what I hear you say, is that strategy effective? Is it working? Are they beating us because
you mean like DeSantis? He's just pummeling. He's just pummeling us. That's what it's just like one thing after another.
I think I can't speak for anybody at the table but me. I've gone through so much because I've been around a little bit, and I never thought I'd see gay marriage in my lifetime. And, you know, and now things are slowly rolling back to, you know, and I'm having bad 70s flashbacks because of it. And, you know, I was way too young in the 70s to be doing drugs, but still, you know, I constantly feel traumatized every time I hear the news, and re-traumatized every time I hear the news. And at some point, I just can't keep up with it. It's just, I think what you said is correct. They are trying to exhaust us. And thank God the youth, I think, you know, there's that song, The Kids Are All Right. You know, the kids are all right. They really are, because they've gone through a hell of a lot more than we did. I didn't sit through active shooter drills.
Exactly.
My niece did.
Right.
You know, at the same time, I didn't sit through the nuclear bomb drills that my parents did. But, you know, there's just, they understand what's at stake. They know that things are not right.
We do. We need to take a page out of their book, because that is what activism looks like. Activism involves usually taking a risk. And that's what all those students did by walking out of that class and possibly messing up their grades, messing up their academic record, whatever it might be. And I think we are very lucky here in South Florida to have some great activists like our Max Fenning, who runs
Max is amazing.
prismfl.org. In fact, they're having a big gala on Saturday, the 6th.
I don't want to pour water on your observation, but I asked the question. In the civil rights movement, John Lewis and the Martin Luther Kings helped to organize the response, but they weren't the thousands or the tens of thousands or the hundreds of thousands that showed up to support the organizational structure. So these students walk out and they organize. My question is, where were the tens of thousands that showed support?
Because it was maybe tens of tens or something like that, which is
especially as connected as we are on social media. It should spread like wildfire.
Why isn't it? That's the question here. You know, if we're going to recognize, like Dale's observation, that we're just being pummeled, when do we begin to say, okay, that's enough and our activism is going to kick in? Because I don't feel or see that. Does anyone else see it?
There has been, so back in 1968, 63, there was something created called CUNY land trusts, okay? And they were designed to help lower income Black families actually obtain home ownership. It was one of the many brilliant things that came out of the civil rights movement back in the 60s. However, no one talks about this. They don't talk about this as a way to actually end housing inequality, for example. That just goes to show there are several tools that have been made accessible for us as a community to actually leverage and create a voice by having assets in our community to actually fight back and have some actual strength. However, we're not utilizing what we already been given. Yeah. We're still screaming and not actually implementing what what we already have created. We need to really look at that. How can we create fortresses and fortitudes within our community and make our voices heard by power, not just screaming into a void?
One last quick observation before we move on to our next story. I'm sure Mark realizes this in terms of being at Treasure Coast Pride over the weekend. So we're dealing with the cancellation of the parade. We're dealing with a move to 21. We're dealing with IDing every single person. And we're dealing with privacy screens on the fences. And when I came, I arrived about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was expecting to see a full protest of the event. And when I arrived, there was no protest of outside. That this was happening.
From the anti-LGBTQ.
No, well, yes, but also from LGBT that was saying no, you know, in protest of that. There was not a single protester against Treasure Coast Pride. There are no Proud Boys. There's no Moms for Liberty. There's no protest at all. And I couldn't help but wonder, well, they're very satisfied with what happened at Treasure Coast Pride.
They are.
And so therefore, where are our activists and our protesters where this has happened at Treasure Coast, and where are our voices? There was also not a single advocacy organization present at Treasure Coast. No carrying a sign and protesting. No booths in terms of registration, fight back, act up.
No Equality Florida, no.
There was no organizational structure. And we report that this is likely the first Pride parade ever in history in America canceled under these circumstances. And our advocacy of our community allows it to pass unchallenged.
Do you think it was because there just wasn't enough time to organize something?
Well,
no, the email came out Thursday.
You would think that Congressman Lewis, wasn't congressman at the time, in 1968 says we're going to meet at the Pettit Bridge. A lot of people would show up at the Pettit Bridge. That didn't happen on Saturday. What's going on?
Maybe there is, I think that we are at a bit of a loss, though, because a lot of the people who would be at the age of running organizations and taking things by the helm is one of the most, just numbers-wise, damaged populations that we have in going through the entire HIV and AIDS crisis. I think that they've really got us in an unfortunate situation in terms of those numbers and leaders that we're missing.
Okay.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.